What if I told you that everything you know about minimalism is actually backward? Think about it. How many times have you tried? You watch a video, get inspired, and declare war on your own home. You fill up trash bags, donate boxes of clothes, and in 6 months, the closets are full again. The clutter always returns. Or worse, you succeed. You empty the space. But instead of the promised peace, all you feel is a cold, sterile emptiness, almost like a soulless showroom. Why does this happen? Why does minimalism for so many people seem to fail? It fails because we've been taught to treat the symptom, overlooking the cause. We treat minimalism as a physical act, the act of removing things. In reality, minimalism is a result. It's the result of deep inner work. It's the result of correcting the 5 foundational mistakes most of us make before we even touch the first object. Today, we're going to talk about the psychological and philosophical mistakes that set us up for failure. We're going to talk about how to fix your mind before you try to fix your home. Mistake 1: confusing the aesthetic with the philosophy. The first, and perhaps the biggest mistake, is the aesthetic trap. Thanks to Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, we've been conditioned to believe that minimalism is a look. It's a neutral color palette. It's the beige organizing bins, the straight-line furniture, the perfectly coordinated capsule wardrobe. So, what do? We try to buy minimalism. We buy new canisters for the pantry, new hangers, new minimalist furniture. This approach doesn't reduce consumption. It simply changes the target of our consumption. This is what I call performative minimalism. It looks good on camera, but it doesn't solve the core problem. The anxiety is still there. It's just better organized. At its core, minimalism is a tool for mental clarity. It is much more than a decorating style. You cannot buy peace of mind. You cannot organize your way to clarity. Peace comes from a much deeper place: the mindset. The aesthetic is, at best, a pleasant byproduct. The philosophy is the actual goal. If your minimalism looks like a showroom, but you still feel empty or anxious, you may have fallen into this trap. True minimalism moves past the question, "Does this look minimalist?" and instead asks, "Is this essential?" Before you buy a single organizing bin, ask yourself, am I solving a storage problem? Or am I just feeding my consumption habit with a new excuse? Mistake 2: the obsession with speed, the weekend minimalism. The second mistake is treating minimalism as a single event instead of an ongoing process. We are the now generation. We want instant transformation. We watch an inspiring documentary, and on Saturday morning, we declare war on our homes. We fill bags, boxes, the whole car. In 48 hours, the house is done. But what happens 3 months later? The clutter returns, and it returns because a fast declutter is like treating a symptom without ever diagnosing the illness. The illness is our consumption pattern. It's our impulse to buy out of boredom, sadness, or for status. The illness is our inability to sit and reflect on why we accumulated so much in the first place. When you declutter with speed, you're operating on adrenaline. This leaves little room for intentionality. You don't have time to process each item. You don't have time to ask, why did I buy this? What emotional need was I trying to fill? Have I truly learned the lesson this object came to teach me? Minimalism should be seen as an archaeological dig into your own mind, rather than a race. If you don't understand the patterns that led you to clutter, you are doomed to repeat them. You will simply make space for new things to come in. What helps change this is to slow down radically. Instead of a weekend, how about a year? Instead of decluttering the closet, how about decluttering a single drawer? Pick up each item. Sit with it. If it brings guilt, analyze the guilt. If it brings nostalgia, honor the nostalgia. The goal is to understand yourself, which is more important than just emptying the drawer. Minimalism is the only minimalism that lasts, because it creates lasting change in your habits and ultimately who you are. Mistake 3. Ignoring emotional and mental clutter. This is the deepest mistake. We believe that clutter is physical. We believe the problem is the books, the clothes, the papers. Physical clutter is almost always a direct symptom of emotional and mental clutter. Before we become minimalists, we fail to recognize that our objects are more than just objects. They are manifestations of our unresolved emotions. But often, we use physical organization as a distraction. It is much easier to sort through boxes than to sort through our own thoughts. It is easier to organize a shelf than to organize our priorities or our anxieties. We obsess over physical objects because they are tangible. When we focus solely on the room, we are choosing the easy battle. If you clear your space but leave your mind cluttered, the silence of a minimalist room won't feel peaceful. It will feel deafening. You haven't solved the problem. You've just removed the distractions that were hiding it. The minimalist journey begins when you stop clearing your shelves and start clearing your thoughts. Ask yourself, what stories am I still telling myself that keep me tied to these objects? What guilt can I release? What person am I trying to prove I am with these possessions? You don't need to master your belongings to find calm. You need to master your attention. When you learn to quiet the internal noise, the physical mess loses its power over you. That is where the real freedom lies. Mistake 4. Creating a vacuum without a vision. This represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how our environment works. We often view minimalism strictly as subtraction. If you create an empty space, but you don't have a clear, positive purpose for that space, it will not stay empty for long. An undefined void feels uncomfortable. It feels sterile. Subconsciously, we start to feel an urge to fill it up again, just to make it feel lived in. We removed the clutter, which acted as a distraction, but we failed to replace it with intention. So, the clutter creeps back in. It returns to fill the silence we weren't ready to handle. Minimalism requires 2 steps. Subtraction creates space, but vision gives that space a purpose. You cannot just say no to the clutter. you must also say yes to something else. If you don't fill that void with the life you actually crave, the clutter will rush back in to fill the silence. You need to claim that space for something real. Maybe a creative passion, a new hobby, or simply a place to finally rest. You have to replace the stuff with life. If you don't plant a garden in that empty soil, weeds will inevitably grow back. Instead of asking, "What can I get rid of?" try asking, "What do I want to make room for?" When the space has a job to do, even if that job is simply to remain peaceful, the clutter loses its permission to return. Mistake 5. Treating minimalism like a dogma. And finally, the mistake that can ruin everything: perfectionism. This is the trap where we turn a tool for freedom into a new source of stress. When we start, we often become rigid. We treat minimalism like a high-stakes test we have to pass. We start believing that the goal is to have a house that looks untouched by human hands. So, when you see dishes in the sink, you feel like you've failed. When you see a pile of papers on the desk, you feel anxious. You start comparing your real, messy life to the curated images you see online. Suddenly, instead of serving you, minimalism starts to judge you. Minimalism is not a destination you arrive at. It is a practice you live in. Life is fluid. It is messy. There will be days when you feel inspired, and days when you slip up and buy something on impulse. That is okay. Progress is never a straight line. Perfection is the enemy of peace. Minimalism is meant to support your life, not restrict it. It doesn't need to look perfect. It just needs to make you feel free. So, these are the 5 mistakes we often make before we even really begin. If you are trying to bring these concepts into your routine, try to look past the aesthetic. Focus instead on clearing out the excess, not just to have an empty room, but to create a life that simply feels lighter and more intentional. And I'm curious to hear your take. Which of these foundational mistakes do you recognize most in your own journey? Share it in the comments below. Until next time, live simply